These strange, scary mysteries can be disturbing to think about, but each one needs to be solved for either the loved ones of those involved or the peace of mind of everybody in the area. Number 5. Korean newlyweds Kim Yoon-suk and Choi Sung-hee haven't been seen or heard from since 2016. The last contact with either missing person were suspicious phone conversations and text messages that left their acquaintances thinking there was much more to the story. At the time, Choi was a successful actress and was preparing for an upcoming play. 6 months earlier, she married Kim, a restaurant owner. The two were preparing to start a family together, and Choi may have been in the early stages of pregnancy when they disappeared. They also had a dog that Choi adored. The strange mystery took place in late May of 2016. Choi and Kim both spent May 27th at work. Choi returned home first. She'd been teaching acting to children and had stopped to buy groceries on her way home from work. She parked in the apartment complex's indoor parking lot, then took the elevator up to the 15th floor. The elevator and hallways all had CCTV cameras which picked up Choi acting normally. About 5 hours later, at 3:45 a.m., Kim returned home. He'd been out with coworkers enjoying a drink. CCTV also showed Kim's trip up to the 15th floor and into his apartment. Neither Choi nor Kim would be seen on CCTV again. Kim's father was the first to contact the police. He hadn't heard from his son for a few days, which was very unusual. When police visited the apartment, they found it empty. Most of the couple's belongings were still there, but a small amount of clothing, their passports, and laptops were missing. It looked as if they'd gone away for a quick vacation, but their dog had been left behind. He clearly hadn't been let out for a few days, which was an alarm bell for those who knew Choi. She wouldn't have left him alone for so long. Police discovered that Choi and Kim's coworkers had heard from them, even as Kim's father placed the missing person report. The assistant director at the theater had received text messages from Choi requesting days off. She explained that she was in the hospital for an accident. Choi had previously suffered from depression, and it was implied that the hospitalization was related to that. The text messages were strange though, and written in a business formal language, whereas Choi's usual messages were written in a more casual formal language. When the assistant tried to call Choi, the phone was turned off. The workers at Kim's restaurant had received a call from him too, saying that he had to go away for a while and was sending money to cover business expenses. They too said that he sounded strange. Kim's phone was still in Busan when it was switched off, but Choi's phone was all the way in Seoul. After June 2nd, both phones were turned off and there were no further signs of life. Since then, no new clues have been uncovered. One of Kim's ex-girlfriends is a person of interest. The woman, known as Yoon, had a very close relationship with Kim. She had been in Norway with her husband up until May 5th, before making a secretive visit to Korea. She moved her return ticket forward, leaving the country on June 7th, and hasn't cooperated with police. Number 4. A strange incident that took place in December of 2002 remains unexplained more than 20 years later. What should have been a routine traffic incident turned into an unsolved mystery that has attracted the attention of paranormal enthusiasts and mystery lovers. It was the evening of December 11th when motorists on the A3 in Surrey saw a car veering off the road. Many called emergency services, believing somebody had been hurt, but it seemed nobody actually stepped onto the motorway. The local police responded quickly, arriving at the alleged crash site, just a few meters before the slip road that led to Burpham, Guildford. But when they arrived, there was no sign of the crashed vehicle. Off the road was a steep embankment, so it was likely that a car had driven off and managed to leave the scene. Even if that had happened though, there were no tire prints or damage to the overgrowth. Police continued to search, and yards away they did find a crashed car, but this wasn't the vehicle that had caused the phone calls. Partially buried in the undergrowth, the car had been there for several months. The vehicle had a layer of rust, the lights were off, and the battery was dead. The driver of the vehicle had apparently managed to escape the car but couldn't climb up the embankment. He was later identified as 21-year-old Christopher Brian Chandler. Christopher had been missing since July of that year. He was last seen while out with friends in West London. He had no connections to Surrey, but one report stated that he was on the run from the police, so he may have decided this was a better place for him to lay low. The cause of his passing couldn't be determined, but doctors believed it was likely related to the crash. While the mystery of what happened to Christopher after he vanished was finally solved, one mystery remained. The number of motorists that had called the police that night indicated that something had been seen. What it was never truly explained. Some have claimed that witnesses saw a ghostly replay of Christopher's crash. The police have dismissed all notions of a ghost crash and treated the accident like an ordinary incident. The truth remains unexplained. Number 3. In the early morning hours of November 8, 1988, the skipper of the schooner Bethonie made 3 strange radio messages to officials in Sydney. The ship and all on board then vanished without a trace. The skipper in question was a man named Ken Jones. Ken was a very experienced sailor, especially in deep water, and had competed in the Admiral's Cup. The schooner was also more than equipped for the journey that it was going to take that summer. It had all the latest technology and was as close to unsinkable as possible. In mid-October, the Bethonie left Fremantle, Western Australia, for a month-long voyage to Airlie Beach in Queensland. As well as Ken, also on board were his wife and daughter, and 2 novice sailors trying to get more hours so they could earn their navigation certificates. The ship's owner, Alan Nichol, was aboard for part of the journey. Alan left the ship in Esperance due to a work commitment. Ken's daughter, Rana Lee, also left the voyage early, disembarking in Port Eyre. That left only the 4 sailors on board. The atmosphere was seemingly pretty good. At one point, the 2 novice sailors, John Blissett and Michael Calvin, sent out a message in a bottle. It simply said that they were having a good time and offered whoever found the bottle a free vacation. The crew apparently made it to Botany Bay when something strange happened. At 12:57 a.m., the radio operator at Sydney's Overseas Telecommunications Commission received a message from Ken. He said that he believed he had run out of fuel and gave his location as approximately 10 miles east of Botany Bay. He added that he'd hoisted the sails and was tracking out to the east and may have been entering the harbor when they arrived in Sydney. The message alone was strange. Ken's children don't believe he would have used the word believed. He would have known if he had run out of fuel or not. It would also be strange to not use the sails if he was in danger of running out of fuel. An hour later, Ken sent another message asking how far south is Maruya, stating that he was unfamiliar with that position. The strangest and final message came shortly after 2 a.m. Ken's voice was cut off by static, but he could be asking 300 kilometers south? Is it south? No contact came from the Bethonie after that point. Ken's son tried to get in touch with him via shore-to-ship radio, but there was no response. However, it wasn't until November 18th when the Bethonie failed to arrive at Airlie Beach that the alarm was raised. Only 2 traces of the Bethonie have ever been found. The first was a barnacle-encrusted life buoy found in May of 1989. Analysis revealed that it could only have been in the water for no more than 4 weeks. The second was a message thrown overboard by the 2 novice sailors, but it wasn't found until 2007. Theories about what happened to the Bethonie ranged from a deliberate sinking by Ken to a takeover by the 2 young sailors to an accident with an unidentified vessel. Without any wreckage of the ship, it may be impossible to solve this mystery. Number 2. One of the scariest unsolved mysteries to date is the location of a nuclear weapon lost off the coast of the US 65 years ago. For most, Tybee Island in Georgia is known for its sandy beaches and old 18th century lighthouse. In 1958, it was almost the site of a nuclear disaster. It was the night of February 5th. A group of pilots from the Homestead Air Force Base in Florida were doing a routine training exercise along the East Coast. That included a simulated combat scenario. Despite the weather, the mission was going well until a B-47 carrying a 7,600-pound nuclear weapon collided with an F-86 fighter plane. Remarkably, the pilot of the fighter plane managed to eject before his craft completely disintegrated. Those aboard the B-47 had a harder choice to make. pilot Colonel Howard Richardson knew crashing with the cargo on board could be a devastating incident. Even if the weapon had no trigger, there was nuclear material on board. As he rapidly lost altitude, he radioed for permission to jettison the ship. It was granted, and the weapon was dropped in the sea just off the coast of Tybee Island. With the weight dispatched, Richardson was able to recover the plane enough to land at Hunter Army Airfield. The emergency landing would earn him a Distinguished Flying Cross. Those aboard the B-47 had no idea what would happen after the nuclear weapon was released. They looked back at the sea, expecting some kind of eruption, but there was nothing. For the next 10 weeks, 1,000 Navy personnel scoured the ocean floor around Tybee in search of the weapon, but found nothing. At the time, officials claimed that the weapon would not be a danger to anyone. It didn't have the plutonium trigger needed to cause the devastation that nuclear weapons are known for, but that may not have been the case. In 1994, a document was declassified that allegedly revealed that the lost weapon was complete and fully functional. Amateur sleuths have conducted plenty of searches over the years. In 2004, a retired Air Force lieutenant believed he had located it after discovering high levels of radiation in one area. That was determined to have been coming from a natural deposit of monazite. The current opinion of the US military is that it's better to leave the device alone, wherever it is. Number 1. Donald Duggar was a long-haul truck driver who had just finished a trip on the East Coast when he vanished under extremely strange circumstances. What happened to him and who he might have seen is a disturbing unsolved mystery. It was the early hours of August 11, 2012, when the strange disappearance occurred. 43-year-old Donald had spent the last few weeks on the road and was now bringing his cab back to his place of work in Warroad, Minnesota. At about 4:30 a.m., he called his sister Diane. He was still in the yard, having returned his cab, but apparently there were 10 people in camouflage clothing surrounding his truck. He sounded panicked, and while on the phone to Diane, he called out to the strangers. He asked them what they wanted and told them he wanted to cooperate. Diane didn't hear a response. After a while, he said he was going to call 911 and ended the call. Donald did make the call to 911, telling them the same story he had told his sister. An officer was sent to investigate, but by the time he arrived, the mysterious individuals had apparently disappeared. Donald and the officer searched around the area and the nearby fields for the strangers, but found nothing. The officer also searched Donald's cab, but didn't find any alcohol or illegal substances. At one point, the officer had to leave to pick up another officer. When he returned, Donald was still in the truck yard. He claimed the men in camouflage had come back, but disappeared again before the police could arrive. The officers left Donald at 6:30 a.m. It was the last time anybody saw him before he vanished. At the time, Donald was moving his belongings from his truck cab into his car, ready to make the final stage in his journey home to Rockert. He would never make it there. Later that day, Donald's sister and nephew tried to contact him but got no response from his cell phone. A few days passed before he was reported missing. On August 17th, Donald's car was discovered on an ATV trail in Beltrami State Forest. This was near Winter Silo. Footprints were found around the vehicle, though there was no sign of a struggle. David's weapon had been left behind, which was extremely unusual for him. The only trace of Donald that's ever been found was a single camouflage glove believed to have belonged to the missing man. What happened to him and what, if anything, he saw has never been solved. Any information that could help solve Donald's disappearance should be passed to the Roseau County Sheriff's Office at 218-463-1421. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.